very interesting statistic because of the challenges faced in India, that one night of poor sleep leads to a 4 to 8-fold increase in insulin resistance over the next 24 hours. And that means your metabolic machinery has to work that much harder,
Correct.
especially in an environment where we have a lot of carbohydrates and excessive sugars in our diets.
And you always feel hungry the next 2 days in any case after a
That's
bad
because
night.
of ghrelin and leptin changes, right? It just makes you feel more hungry. And psychologically, you're more favorable towards trans fats, salt, and sugar. It's a physiological response. Your body has recognized you're in a sleep-deprived state. Your attention is going to be diminished. So I need to consume calories to keep my alertness level high because there's a predator that's about to get me, right?
Correct.
We didn't evolve in a land of food booking applications. Now anyone can get anything within 10 minutes, which is absurd, really absurd. It just means that trigger to reward time is so little. So short.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, your habit coach. And today we have a very interesting episode, something that I am extremely passionate about. It is about our body and just what amazing things it is capable of doing. And we're going to understand where we are right now and what are the things that we can do. We have a guest that I've been wanting to interview for a while. I just finished reading his book. And we're going to be talking about the cutting edge of our human body. We're going to be talking to Dr. Marcus Ranney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I loved your book. And, I love the fact that you're a fellow explorer and love going to, pushing yourself to the edge to understand how our body reacts to things.
Yeah.
We all stay in metro cities, especially people listening to this podcast for sure, right? And we are not using our bodies the way probably it is capable of being used. When you see people in our metro cities, like, what do you think? Like, do you want to like shake them up and tell them there's so much that you can do with your body. What are you doing right now?
The one place that really peeves me off the most is airports. I sit there, I'm walking around, I'm trying to get my step count in because can't get any on the flight. And I just look around and I wonder, what has happened to us as a species that has led to this sedentary lives, high calorific access, stressed out. Everyone is on a call, on their phone, taking the travelator or the escalator. Unfortunately, very worrying study which was just published a couple of weeks ago. In urban India, we have over 70% of our population obese and overweight.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? That's a ridiculous... And our denominators are not small denominators either.
Yeah, that's huge.
Right? So it's something which is hugely frustrating. I think philosophically, neither you or I, align to that. We like to be outdoors. We like to enjoy everything. And so the book, when I wrote it many years ago, it's a dedication to my kids, with the hope that they fall in love with the science as much as I do. But it's also sort of hopefully my sort of seed thought to our species that, look, nature and the outdoors is a beautiful place and you can learn and enjoy so much. And here's a journey internally to get you there as well. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope many people watching this will listen to that or read that as well.
And the journey for me started off very similarly to the way that you started your book, which was when I was extremely unfit. I started my fitness journey, and then as my first challenge, never having trekked in my life, I decided to do EBC.
Okay.
Right? So I was on a flight to...
That was my first trek as well, by the way.
Yeah. So I was in Kathmandu with a suitcase because I didn't have any trekking gear. There was no decathlon or places to buy anything.
Right.
So bought stuff in Kathmandu on a flight to Lukla the next day. So that's how it started.
Okay. That's brave or stupid.
The goal was to fail at it.
Okay.
I was passing through a phase where I was like, I want to fail at things right now. I'm winning everything. I want to fail.
Yeah.
It was a phase in my life. And that's when you suddenly start respecting the body and how it adapts, because you're there for 14 days.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere and the oxygen suddenly starts getting to you.
Yeah.
Today, sitting at sea level, what are the things that we can do to experience what our bodies can be capable of? What are the steps we should start taking?
I think there's a lot, right? I remind people that our body is a machine, and like any machine, the more you use it, the better it becomes, right? Any car, no matter what make or model or class, stuck in a garage for X number of months or years will stop working eventually just because of degeneration. And our machines are exactly the same. We've got an incredible aerobic capacity to do things. And we're living in a time where the corporate social culture is embracing marathon running, triathlons, duathlons. I think the sales of bicycles and pets went up through the pandemic, right? And so people are interested in moving and getting out more. So I think that's a great way of making a first step. And some of the best runs, and I'm a part of this amazing little running community where we have people joining that have never run before, and just getting them to see their first 5 or 10K run and how exhilarated they feel. Even on the trek we're doing this summer that we were just talking about, we've got 3 people joining who have never been to altitude, and 4 people who've never done a big expedition like this before. So that's going to be an incredible experience for them. Wow. And I really enjoy being part of that journey. So I think that's a great place to start. I think the other big area, I'm not sure how many of our listeners and viewers are approaching that stage in life where the big 4-0 is a number chronologically for them. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, you're approaching this stage of andropause where hormones are changing, muscle mass is rapidly going to start declining, bone health is going to deteriorate at an unprecedented scale. So spending time doing resistance form, it doesn't need to be in the gym. It could be free weights, it could be the latest Instagram trend of calisthenics, etc. But making sure you're exposing and stimulating your muscles and your bone health to that, very, very important. And then the other big trend in all of this is flexibility and balance, right? It's a natural deterioration as we get older. I remember my time, I'm aging myself now, but 20 years ago almost, when I did my first orthopedic rotation, the consultant told us that anyone who comes in with a fractured neck or femur, if they're above the age of 70, they have a 70% mortality rate within that 1 year.
Wow.
Right? And that's not because of the break in bone, it's the secondary consequences of being immobile. Deterioration, sepsis, infection, blood clots, etc. So prevention is always going to be better than cure. Probably a theme we'll talk a lot about today. So ensuring that you have the flexibility, the balance, the muscular strength, the bone health, the aerobic capacity. These are things that we should be doing now at this stage and actually 10 years prior.
Correct.
So that we're laying that foundation of good habits to hold us in good stead when we get older.
It's so interesting that there's a generation that's growing up that has so much exposure to exercise.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up, if I was in my 20s and I wanted to go to the gym, people would make fun of me saying, "Why do you want to become Arnold Schwarzenegger?"
Yeah.
Right? Like that was the attitude that we had towards physical exercise in India, especially.
Yeah.
So it's lucky that I see these kids wanting to be this. You said flexibility is important.
I'll just say something there though, because I'm a big believer in the language dictates our culture and narrative. And every time somebody mentions this to me, I try and correct them, which is people still use the phrase fitness freak.
Right.
And I immediately remind them, and I said, freak is something which we associate with a negativity. Why don't we call it some sort of passion, fitness enthusiast, or fitness lover instead?
Correct.
So that we put a positive spin on that narrative. Yeah.
It's my pet peeve as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Ashton, you're a fitness freak. No, dude, I'm doing the normal thing. You are lazy. Change the narrative.
Yeah.
It's the same way when people get on a nutrition plan.
Right.
Why are you trying to be this diet person?
Correct.
No, dude, I'm just eating like a normal person.
Yeah.
Supposed to.
Again, I never use the word diet. I'll always talk about fuel. Once you understand your machine, fuel is critical to movement and just expenditure, and then it changes the way you think about what you put inside of your body.
How do you talk about nutrition in today's day and age?
Yeah.
When probably nutrition and religion are the two biggest firecrackers that you can start talking about.
Yeah.
Anything you say is going to be pounced on.
Yeah. Especially on social media.
On social media, especially. How do you decide what to eat? It's the strangest thing.
So I keep it really simple, right? For me, it's got to be sustainable, i.e. you should be able to do it for your entire lifetime. And it therefore is not a fad which you'll do for a few weeks and then be onerous and drop out. And it's got to be sustainable from a climate perspective as well. Big challenge facing all of us is going to be what's going to happen to our planet in the next few years and decades. So keeping it local, keeping it seasonal, organic practices where possible, being as much towards plant-based as possible. These are things that help from a sustainability, from a climate perspective. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is balancing the macros. So I'm not obsessed about calories. Calories is just a unit of energy measurement.
Right.
But an apple and a chocolate bar can have the same number of calories. One we know is clearly good for you, one is not. So balancing macros, understanding your body's needs based upon your expenditures, and therefore what you're putting in from protein to fat to fiber to carbohydrate. So that's sort of my second area. And the third area is around the micronutrient essentials that we require. And the reason why this is important is not because, I'm paid by any pharmaceutical or nutraceutical company. I'm not. This is because the quality of soil and the quality of produce has become so pathetic over the last 4 or 5 decades that we are fundamentally deficient in many of these basic micronutrients which our bodies require in order to do its job.
Correct.
Magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin B, etc. These are all really important for us. So that's how I try to keep the rules quite basic, and then you can layer on everything else. I mean, there's so many studies about everything else. You can do what you want there. Yeah.
And this might jump into a little biohacking bit, but how many supplements do you take?
So I actually change it up. So there are about 5 or 6 supplements that I take on a daily basis. I measure my bloods every quarter.
Okay.
Everyone in our clinic, we have a clinic called Ever. This whole premise of living healthier ever after.
Nice.
So everyone in the clinic, we measure their bloods every 3 to 6 months. Based on those deviations, we arrive at which of the micronutrient supplements that they need to take. But for everyone listening, I mean, there are some core ones that we should all fundamentally be on. Magnesium is probably the big one first.
Which format?
So there are different salts. I like biglycinate. Citric is there as well. Threonate is also there. 400 to 800 milligrams.
Okay.
Typically, the powders in water have the best bioavailability in terms of absorption, better than the capsules. But there are other brands which have capsules, and you can do one's homework to look at bioavailability of those. So magnesium is the first one. I think a lot of our audience probably listening in from India or South Asia. So vitamin B and D are the two biggest deficiencies. About 90% of the population are deficient, especially people with a plant diet. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we just spoke about how plants are important, but the availability of protein, the diversity of protein, and the amino acid structure of those proteins are different.
Correct.
So you're going to have to ensure that you're getting vitamin B and vitamin D. I like to keep the levels quite on the higher side because the lab ranges are based on a sick population.
Correct.
So it's artificially lower than
we
what
have
it
to talk
should
about
be.
this later.
We must, because we should educate people listening in. So when people do the bloods in our labs, we have very specific ranges for what we consider optimal for performance and longevity, and we encourage you to get there. So B and D are probably the next ones. Omega-3, very important cholesterol molecule. Our bodies require cholesterol. Anyone who thinks cholesterol is bad, they have a clear misunderstanding. It's been vilified by the media.
Correct.
So cholesterol is important, particularly the good forms of which omega-3 is the primary source. And you get it not just from fish oil capsules, but also now there are vegan sources available as well. So we have both of those available for people who need it. And then there's a long list of, literally hundreds of them. At any one point in time, I'm probably, to answer your question, about 6 or 7. I do rotate them around, checking bloods every 3 months, and then giving the body a natural rest while I then add another one to optimize from that perspective. Yeah.
And do you have herbs as well, like Brahmi, Ashwagandha, those kinds of?
Sometimes I do. So I have, I would probably be on a 3-month course of Ashwagandha in the year, and similar for the other ones. I like curcumin. I like haldi for its anti-inflammatory properties. So we use that a lot. So the ones we consume and prescribe basis the individual's physiology
would go up and down.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the blood work since we touched upon it.
Sure. Yeah.
So you said something very interesting. Like most of the blood work parameters are of sick people. How are these parameters arrived at, and what is your take on all of this?
So it's basically a bell-shaped curve, right? So we're looking at a quote-unquote normal population. We look at the 67% of people that form 80% of that, the middle, the big middle, and then you have the people on the end. So when a lab reports what a normal range is, it's normal for that curve. Now, we can understand and appreciate that our levels of health have deteriorated on all accounts over the last 5 or 6 decades. So we are fundamentally shifting to the right-hand side. Triglyceride levels are going up. Fasting insulin levels are going up. A1C levels are going up.
Correct.
In the converse, vitamin B levels are going down. Vitamin D levels are going down, etc. So when a lab reports something is normal, they're just saying normal based on the population that they measure a lot of. And if the vast majority of that population is anyway subclinical in either direction, you're going to be shown as normal, even though for your physiology, you're not.
Correct.
Right? So what the team and I have done is we've studied the global literature and we've identified what is normal and optimal for age and biology. And therefore, based on the levels that we do with the bloods, we're able to then map to where are you on those two axes. And therefore, what do you need to do in terms of biohacking, which could be nutrition, it could be exercise, it could be sleep, it could be micronutrients, it could be hormonal optimization, it could be so many different things. But what do we need to do to now get you into the good and then the optimal category?
Would you also be looking at things like the ultra fit people or like tribal communities that would, not necessarily have the kind of lifestyle issues that we have right now?
So it's a bit difficult on a data perspective because there's not so much out there. So we're quite fortunate that we get the opportunity to work with some really high performance athletes. The team and I, we work with IPL cricketers, we work with Olympians, we work with Paralympians. So we have access to that and we understand what levels they require because they really are pushing their body, pun intended, to the human edge. And, folks like you and I are probably more weekend warriors, but we still want to achieve a high level of performance and plan for longevity. Then what is the optimal status for us there? So that's what we can manageable and practically do based on those constraints.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it'd be interesting to see what tribal communities, their blood work would be like, right?
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating. I'm sure, wouldn't there be data on it around or not sufficient?
Maybe someone listening might find it and you can
and
send it in.
to us.
Yeah. I'd love to look at that data.
You versus a Maasai warrior. I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, my wife, who is a practicing sports physiotherapist, she was consulting a group of people in the Jain community. I think it's the Digambar Jains who undergo really prolonged periods of fasting.
Fasting, right?
Yeah. And they, because of that, unfortunately, tend to have a lot of osteopenia, which is improper bone building, muscle loss, sarcopenia, etc. So she was managing some individuals from that community, and they just happened to have their blood work. And I remember at the time seeing the bloods, and we saw cholesterol levels which were really high that we might consider, okay, well, this just seems like this is bad, right? But actually, if you really think about it, what they're eating and how they're eating and their balanced diet, even though they're moving, etc. So it would be really interesting to see that amongst different communities, what is good, what is bad, what is normal, what is abnormal.
Correct.
Because our definitions are very much skewed.
It's very skewed because where would you find a normal human?
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with psychology, right?
Yeah.
Where do you find a normal person? What are the things that are exciting you right now in the cutting edge of, this space that you're in?
Actually sit on the other side of the spectrum. And I'll explain what I mean. So I spend time in high performance and I spend time as a longevity physician. If we look at the longevity narrative, I mean, it didn't exist when I started talking about this a few years ago in India, right? People would look at me and aren't all doctors meant to help you live longer? That's another area altogether. But longevity can broadly be looked at as a spectrum where on one end you have, as you were describing, these innovative, cutting edge, new techniques, new therapies, new molecules, new devices, etc. And that's all really exciting. And early adoption is there. Monies are now increasingly going towards that direction. For me, actually, I'm on the left-hand side, which is the fundamental good practices of what it means to live healthier. Right? I don't have an ambition to live forever. In fact, anyone who does is probably insane. Right? I think humans need an expiry date. It's the only way we can allow the next gen and innovate and problems to be solved. But I don't want to live my older years in sickness and ill health, as I imagine a lot of people share that sentiment. And what should we therefore do in the decades that we have most control over, which is where hopefully we've built up a little bit of wealth. We have accessibility and affordability. We have a little bit more time. And we have had that awakening in our minds about mortality and this pressing need for investment in those later years, which typically for people happen in their third, fourth, and fifth decades of life, right? So what should we be doing in these decades, which will lay a really solid foundation so that chronic disease happens at a much later stage, because inevitably something will happen, but the degree of slope of drop-off should be so acute that suffering is as minimal as possible, right? So that's how I look at this world of longevity. So there are many conferences and events that happen around the world which are talking about all these crazy things. I have increasingly sort of slowly withdrawn a little bit from that, but what I try to focus on is fundamentals of good sleep, nutrition, or fueling the body right, the various ways we should be moving and exercising, the micronutrients that our bodies require, managing and mitigating stress, human relationships and connections, joy, purpose, gratitude, spending time in nature, being an active, hands-on father, whilst my kids still allow me to do so. That's where I invest my time, and that's how I try and encourage other people to do theirs. And it's the core philosophy of what we do in our longevity practice and the technology that we're building to support that as well.
How do you bring in family into this? How do you...
So Raina and I, we act as role models. And we realized pretty early on that you can't teach your kids anything. It's about what you show them or what you do. And you know this better than I do, right? You're the behavioral coach in the room. So it's that copycat attitude with young children that they replicate their parents. And our job as parents is just not to screw our kids, screw their minds in any way. Just show them good practices, and they're more likely to copy that going forward.
Correct.
So as families, we try and plan holidays in nature as much as we can. We try and do active holidays as much as we can. It could be skiing, it could be trekking, it could be fishing, just anything that involves that sort of outdoor activities. And then they see their parents doing these things at the weekends, whether it's a long run, a long walk, going to the gym, all of those things. And so that's how we try and sort of bring that in.
Were you and your wife equally active people?
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. I think we probably enjoy different things which are natural, but we've found as a couple that wanting to grow together in pursuits of interests rather than divergently in pursuits of interests is a really important thing to keep our relationship engaged. And we found, therefore, that these types of things outdoors is something that brings us together. So every year, once a year, we do this big expedition and adventure. We call it Gugogam, which is our hashtag, which is get up, get out, get moving.
Nice.
And then over the years, through Instagram and social media and all of that stuff, we've been trying to inspire and bring other people along the journey with us. So that's what we try and do.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so a big issue that many people, especially in Mumbai and the listeners, face is sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Sleep has got a bad rep because it's a wastage of time, people think. What is your take on sleep, and why is sleep so important for us?
Look, evolution is such a precise science. Anything that's not advantageous to an organism is rooted out, right? Not on timescales that we're used to, but on planetary timescales. And the fact that sleep remains something which every life form to some degree has means that there is a critical component of it which is advantageous to the organism. Otherwise, it's pretty... it's pretty weird to think that you would effectively shut down the machine for 8 hours in a day, a third of our life, and leave you prey vulnerable to predators around you, right? Without protection. So clearly there's an evolutionary advantage of doing so. Sleep plays many roles: physical recovery, mental recovery, emotional growth, all of those things. The different phases or components of sleep: deep sleep for physical health, REM sleep, which is where our dreams happen, that's for mental and emotional repair and growth, etc. So I think these are very important biological principles which increasingly now people are being made more and more aware of. If we look at any data, whether it's the data from our high performance athletes to corporate executives, to, just health conditions like diabetes, insulin resistance, neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease. There are direct links now showing how a lack of sleep over prolonged periods of time cause a deterioration in function and therefore health and performance. So it's a very powerful drug. It's freely available to us, and we're just not utilizing it to our advantage, which is hugely frustrating. Because it's free, perhaps.
You just don't respect the things that are free.
You ask any rich man, how much they would give for a good night's sleep, and they probably give you their entire kingdom.
It's true. It's so true.
Yeah.
It's one of those hard things to understand, right? Like, it is the most natural thing for babies to be doing, and somewhere along the line, we've lost it.
Yeah.
Also, there's a theory that we've forgotten how to sleep correctly.
Right.
Do we have one proper full sleep cycle? Do we wake up in the middle of the night, walk around, come back? Like, what format of sleep are humans supposed to have has been lost to the ages.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a beautiful topic to start focusing on as a way. What are some of your favorite hacks to get a good night's sleep?
So, magnesium is very important because it plays a role across, I think, something like 600 different metabolic reactions and pathways. But it is a very powerful aid for sleeping. It's advantageous because it's non-toxic, by and large, obviously brand dependent. It is non-addictive. And the profile means that you can go at a really high dose and you don't need to be too worried about physiological reactions or adverse events in the body.
Except pooping.
Except sometimes some people gastrointestinal disturbances.
Sometimes. I know it was like a sure thing whether if you overdose on your magnesium.
If you're very, very high, if you're ridiculously high levels. But in the dosages that we look at, which is typically 400 to 600 milligrams per day, there's generally there's not a problem. Yeah. So magnesium for me over the last 3 or 4 years has been a great addition to my toolkit, and it's something we prescribe for everyone in our longevity practice. The next thing is temperature. So the importance of core body temperature is that as we prepare and get into deep sleep, our core body temperature drops as our metabolic rate drops. And we can assist that by altering the ambient temperature around us. So typical studies have shown that 17 to 19 degrees Celsius, 60 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit is an optimal range. I do appreciate that some people find that too cold.
Correct.
And I have many clients and patients who tell me that their partner cannot tolerate.
Yeah,
I don't have a biohack for that.
19 degrees.
There is now a bed, I won't mention the brand, there is a bed available where both halves of the bed, like a car, can be temperature controlled. So one partner can be at a warm, the other partner can be at a cold. So it's expensive, but there's a cost to comfort nowadays. Yeah. And hopefully sleeping in the same room, that's more important. So temperature has been another
But that's an interesting one. Same room, same bed, same room, different beds.
Look, if you're an influencer in longevity like Brian Johnson is, he sleeps alone. And I think he has the record for
longest perfect cycle,
etc. Right now, I like sharing my bed with my partner. There are additional benefits.
There are
perks to that. So I think they compensate for perhaps not getting 100% sleep. I'm sure I'm going to be in trouble when she watches this. So I still advocate for partners sharing a bed together.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. All right, so that's the other. Temperature's a powerful one. There's a thermal contrast effect. So heat therapy, sauna therapy, a hot shower, immersion in warm water like a hot bath helps in vasodilation, nitric oxide release, relaxes blood pressure. Reduces sort of the stress response. And if exposed to immediately before a cold environment, that sort of thermal contrast can be an additive effect from a biohacking perspective. And I've certainly seen that whenever I'm traveling, if I have access to a steam or sauna in the hotel, I'll go down and spend 20 minutes in that, up to 30 to 40 minutes.
Just
before sleep.
Okay,
Yeah. Very, very powerful relaxation agent.
What are your thoughts on those Sona blankets that you can, roll out
I mean,
at home?
I've not used it. I think some of the challenges there is the core body temperature, right? The key here is that you want to raise body temperature before you go to bed, but whilst you're asleep, you want to make sure the ambient temperature is nice and low. And I think we've all experienced nights which have been too hot, and we've had a really poor night's sleep because of it, right? So that's another thing. I think technology usage is very, very, very bad from a sleep perspective. Everyone will have heard about blue light, white light from screens. So making sure that you have a nice sleep routine where you're disconnecting, you're engaging in media which is not raising your adrenaline levels. So not seeing those silly news programs where 10 people are shouting at each other with those red banners and all of that stuff.
75 people have died in something, correct.
Yeah. So, watching a fun comedy, listening to your favorite podcast, Audible book plug, or reading a nice book, etc. These are nice things to do, which help.
Do all of you all wear blue blockers at home?
No, so I have a pair of blue blockers that I will use if I'm on my laptop or iPad, late into the night, if I'm doing, let's say, a live or a digital engagement for a client in the US or Europe, etc. So I have to be on there late. So I'll wear the blue blockers there. I have a set of red lenses, which if I'm doing like a red-eye flight or late flight, I'll have in my travel bag.
Okay.
Because of the LEDs in the airport and on the aircraft. People look at me as if I'm a cyborg or something from the X-Men. I think it's a good conversation starter.
Or a celebrity.
Yeah, or a celebrity. Yeah. I'm a fan of superheroes, so I have those handily available. So those are nice and easy to use. What you eat is also very powerful. Now, generally speaking, the advice is that one shouldn't eat for about 2 or 3 hours before we go to bed. Ancient wisdoms: eat from sunrise to sunset.
Correct.
Very, very effective. And ensuring that meal is on the lower side of carbohydrates, because you don't want too much insulin riding around in the system. So have your protein, have your good fat and fiber, stay well hydrated, consume and finish about 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep. Those are really powerful. There are foods which contain tryptophan, which get broken down in the body to help produce melatonin, which is the hormone which relaxes the body. And there are many vegetables and food items and nuts and seeds, etc., that you can consume from that perspective. So actually, there's quite a lot out there in the toolkit. I mean,
what are the foods? I know like pistachios are good.
Pistachios are good. I think green leafy vegetables are another.
Rice has, right?
Is it?
Rice is tryptophan. That's why.
I don't know about that, and I think my team are gonna, berate me for not knowing this when asked the question. But luckily, we have Google, Siri, Alexa,
find out
and ChatGPT and all of that for that. So yeah, those are powerful. So actually, there's a lot one can do, right, to get, and none of these are crazy expensive, crazy difficult. It's just about the right behaviors and habits to get going.
I think it's for people, the idea of, how can I go to sleep while my friends are still awake? Especially in this generation, that's a huge thing, right? Like, I'm going to miss out on something. They'll send me something and I won't be able to see it.
So we converted FOMO to JOMO. We actually, it's a little sadistic, I suppose, but we take great pleasure in not turning up or going out for all the stuff because, frankly, you don't need to.
Correct.
Right? Especially when there's big stuff happening. And also ensuring that we slip away early. Those extra hours in bed have a huge, huge benefit. A very interesting statistic, because of the challenges faced in India, that one night of poor sleep leads to a 4 to 8-fold increase in insulin resistance over the next 24 hours, right? And that means your metabolic machinery has to work that much harder,
correct,
especially in an environment where we have a lot of carbohydrates and excessive sugars in our diets.
And you always feel hungry the next 2 days in any case after a
That's
bad
because
night.
of ghrelin and leptin changes, right? It just makes you feel more hungry. And psychologically, you're more favorable towards trans fats, salt, and sugar. It's a physiological response. Your body has recognized you're in a sleep-deprived state. Your attention is going to be diminished. So I need to consume calories to keep my alertness level high because there's a predator that's about to get me, right?
Correct.
We didn't evolve in a land of food booking applications. Now anyone can get anything within 10 minutes, which is absurd, really absurd. It just means that trigger to reward time is so little. So short. Yeah.
I was watching a video where this person was saying that, it was about 2 a.m. and I felt like having this soup from the shop. And where's the shop? Underneath my building.
Okay.
But I called one of these food delivery apps. This man actually came and delivered it from the ground floor up to the
My
first.
goodness.
So it's crazy just how dependent we've gotten on these. Our lifestyles have changed completely.
Well, if you go to the US and you use one of these platforms, and you order a banana, the banana comes peeled and cut in a plastic covering. I mean, it's just absurd.
The banana has its own covering.
It's naturally provided, and you can chew. You know, we can bite and chew. It doesn't need to be cut for us. Yeah.
For these parties, my new thing is follow the LIFO format, last in, first out.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Okay. But you don't be too. I mean, that might be too late, right? Last in.
Yeah, but then at least you met everybody.
Okay.
Because if you're first in, first out, you've not met half the people.
That's true. And best thing is forget about saying bye, because that process alone can take half an hour to 1 hour.
It's called the Irish escape or something.
Irish escape. That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So
you'll be giving away all our social secrets. Everyone's going to realize this now.
Make sure your friends don't watch this. No, watch it. Okay. So we've covered sleep.
Yeah.
When we think about longevity, what are things that are really exciting you about, this field of longevity? I'm coming from this place of everyone talks about exercise more, eat correctly, etc., etc., etc. But what are the aspects that people are not looking at that are coming out as aha moments for you, especially in the last couple of years?
I think the big thing for me is the increasing awareness around data. Because of the technology trends that have happened in the last few years, we've had a massive rise in awareness because of the pandemic. Right? Fundamentally, our knowledge and awareness of health importance has elevated. Right? That's no longer a case and that's not going to unwind. But what's also happened is technology has become increasingly miniaturized, increasingly personalized. There are new formats now available in measurement techniques. I was yesterday sent a very interesting device that measures my blood glucose, not through a skin prick, not through a patch on my arm, but through my thumbs on a surface, right? It's a little device, and they have sent it to me for testing it out to see what the efficacy is. We could potentially use it in the clinic for our patients, right? So I think there's some really cool stuff that's happening. So what this means is that my ability, when I say I mean like a physician's ability or a coach's ability to provide insight into a client's biology and use that as a learning moment to engage with them and set them on a path that they can then measure and track progress has now changed. I don't need to wait for them to go to a sleep lab because I can give them a sleep ring or a fitness tracker. I don't need them to go and get their VO2 max tested in a fitness laboratory because their wearable device will give me a surrogate marker that I can track. A smart scale will give me their body composition. I can measure their glucose. There's so many things now. So that has really unlocked a great opportunity, and we use it very much so to our advantage. So that on the application, on their mobile phone, they're immediately able to see all of their biomarkers. They could be their blood analysis, their digital analysis, their functional measurements, etc. We at the back end can show them these are the biohacks that you should be doing, and then you can track it and show them, okay, you know what? You took magnesium for 6 weeks. See what happened to your sleep scores.
Interesting.
Right? You took omega-3 for 3 months. See how your LDL, your triglycerides, and your ApoB cholesterol levels have come down, right? And suddenly that's an aha moment. And they're like, okay, I'm more likely to stick because you've shown it to me based on N equals 1.
Correct.
My physiology, my data, not some random piece of information out there. Yeah.
Amazing. So the tech that you're excited about is actually in the diagnosis aspect of it more than in the, become a cyborg aspect of it.
Oh, yeah. Very much so. I think that's part of the journey, right? It will, I'm sure, evolve to that element, but one has to crawl first before we can walk or run. Yeah.
What is your take on stimulants like your caffeine, etc.?
I like caffeine. There's a clear epidemiological advantage. Numerous studies scientifically proven around the world, including anecdotal evidence from blue zones, have shown that consuming 1 to 2 cups of caffeine a day has a longevity benefit. It could be the reduction in cardiovascular risk. It could be the socialization that is associated with it. So we can't tease out those aspects. So people should appreciate that. But there's clearly an advantage. And when we talk about caffeine, I don't mean the brands which are basically selling you sugar on the high street.
Correct.
We mean proper caffeine, black
in the form of coffee or tea,
etc. Right?
Because the strangest thing just happened to me. I gave up coffee 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I'm addicted to it. Let me give it. I was having 3 cups or maybe 4. And I was like, and from yesterday onwards, I've just been feeling foggy and I have this headache that doesn't seem to go away.
Sure. Classic withdrawal.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you suddenly realize just how dependent you're on it.
Yeah. There are many people that are dependent on it. 3 to 4 cups is probably a little bit too much. There is a stimulant advantage. So I'm currently drinking coffee because we are having this conversation.
Correct.
Otherwise, I have actually reduced my caffeine intake quite considerably because I have seen in my own physiology that even if I'm disciplined enough to have my cup of coffee before 2 p.m., that my sleep scores that night do deteriorate, and I generally have that slightly higher level of anxiety and alertness than I would like just to stay calm. Right?
Nice.
So I've cut it off, but when I need to up my performance, so if I'm running a marathon, if I'm taking part in, let's say, a social fitness competition, if I'm doing a conversation like this, then I will add that extra little bit of stimulant to help me achieve a better score.
Interesting. So you're using it as a tool, not as a daily habit.
Absolutely.
So would you have a morning routine with a coffee or no?
No, I don't. I don't have that. So my morning routine is typically just hot water with mint leaves in it. Some mornings when...
Why mint? Just for the taste?
Just for the flavor. Okay. Just actually for the flavor, just to get that hydration in. Before this day starts, if it's a running morning, and I typically run in a zone 2 workout, which is keeping a heart rate about 60 to 70%, then I try and stay fasted to augment the beta oxidation of fat from a health perspective. So water is very important hydration status in the morning. And on days that I feel that there's maybe a bit of an inflammation brewing, then I'll add some curcumin, haldi, to the water
in the morning,
just to get a benefit of that. Yeah.
And do you fast regularly?
I've reduced it a lot. So I used it, a few years ago when I was metabolically much unhealthier than I am today. It was a very effective tool to realign my metabolic flexibility towards fat oxidation rather than carbohydrate requirement. I was able to bring my visceral fat scores down.
Okay.
Which was really important, and because of that, my liver function improved, and all those other consequences. Now, I mean, also the science is changing. The science will always change, and I know it's often an area that people want to be counseled on. The latest data is suggestive that the biggest gain is because of the restriction in calories. Right?
Okay.
We are calorific excess. When I say we, I mean
everyone.
Yeah. So generally speaking, a 20 to 25% net reduction in calories is advantageous to the organism. And therefore, intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating is just a convenient way of doing so.
Interesting.
Right? So people who want to do it, I often remind them that the best meal to bring up is dinner rather than missing breakfast.
Correct.
Right? So bring your dinner up by maybe an hour or so, add more hydration. You can still therefore eat your breakfast on time or just after your workout, and that can become routine. We try and get a 3-day fast in, a water-only fast, once a year. It used to be more frequent than that. It's now once a year. And that's more because there is a little bit of science which is showcasing the benefits of autophagy, autoself-phagy clean. So there's a benefit of doing so. It's easier for men to fast than women because of the hormonal profile through the month. And particularly people who are metabolically at the worser side of the spectrum. or people who are looking to shed visceral fat as diagnosed on a DEXA scan or an ultrasound, and wanting to bring that down, then the combination of zone 2, low intensity, steady cadence, long exercise, along with a fasting window, is a great adjunct from a biohacking perspective.
Interesting. So that is the way that you would typically look at it. I had somebody who would be like doing 5-day fasts every month and then doing an OMAD diet, etc. All of that is very excessive from the studies that are coming out right now, correct?
I think everything in moderation is beneficial. There's clearly a hormetic stress that our bodies get a benefit from physiologically. We're hunter-gatherers. We're used to this idea. There's clearly a social element because every single cultural practice around the world has fasting built in. So there's clearly a benefit of doing
Let's do this together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I have clients who've taken it, I think, a little bit far. I mean, there's one individual gentleman who comes to mind who has done so well, and he's lost a lot of weight, but he now eats once every 3 days.
Wow.
And I keep reminding him that you're not OMAD, you're like whatever that acronym is, like once 3 days. So he's on the reverse journey of now reintroducing food to the body because he feels so sluggish after he eats.
Correct.
That he has to reintroduce food slowly to get used to that. So yeah, it's clearly got a benefit. I think the takeaway is that it's not a one size fits all. It shouldn't be done in excess, and it should be done under counsel, not just of a health advocate or a practitioner, but even looking at your own biological data. Look at your body composition, muscle mass, visceral fat, do your blood tests, look at your fasting insulin, look at your cholesterol levels, look at your hormonal profile. Excessive fasting for men can significantly depress testosterone levels. So look at all of these things and then figure out a plan and measure and progress and see how you go from there.
It's interesting because like when people normally go for a blood test, they get the standard blood test done, which don't cover half these.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's another
ones that you'll be talking about, right?
Yeah.
Apart from the normal blood tests that people do, are there any like 3 parameters that you would definitely want to?
Yeah, for sure. I always add a fasting insulin.
Okay.
Because that'll give me an earlier signal than your A1C or sugar change. Just to break it down, right? We look at A1C to see whether you're at risk or have developed diabetes or pre-diabetes. But if we wait for that to happen, that's often, it's not too late, but it means that you've fully blown out the disease. Your fasting insulin will rise before that because there'll be a degree of insulin resistance. So I always add a fasting insulin. I always add an LP little a. LP little a is your genetic risk for cholesterol sticking in places it shouldn't. You only really need to do it once in your life. It's almost like a screening tool.
Correct.
But knowing that level will tell you how aggressive you need to be on whether you need to be on a lipid lowering agent at a lower value or whether we can do more lifestyle practices because of your risk profile. So
that would be a gene test.
No, it's a blood test.
Oh, it's in a blood.
It's a protein in your blood, which is on the lipoprotein. It's a lipoprotein in the bloodstream, which we can measure. So that's a simple blood test. And then the other one that I would probably suggest everyone does is their inflammatory marker, which is either CRP, C-reactive protein, or hsCRP, highly sensitive CRP. So what we did at the clinic was we looked at normal panels and we designed for what is the optimal panel from a longevity perspective. So now it's actually very simple. Someone can just book a blood test through us and they will automatically get all 120 parameters done.
Okay, fantastic.
And it analyzes it as per the reporting that I was just suggesting based on optimal ranges. And the next step, which we're building now, is in the app itself, that the app starts to interpret and make suggestions for you based on those deviations so that you don't have to wait to see your clinician, your physician, or your health coach.
Oh, start doing this. I would suggest do this from now onwards.
Absolutely.
How do people find this blood test? Where should people?
They can reach out to me on social. I'm pretty active. The handle is at DocM, my surname, Ranney. If they're interested in knowing more about the longevity program, it's called EVER, as I was sharing. So it's ever.humanedge.co. And yeah, those are probably two resources that they can immediately access.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Doctor, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
IVM